the initial work that I think they intended to do in their heads, right, in their heads, was this good, wonderful thing to help these little children who had these fathers that are absent. Again, that mindset of that I can't be racist, I'm doing this good thing,
right?
But then you're perpetuating stereotypes.
They made assumptions without doing any homework, any background
Well, denying your humanity in
all.
a lot of respects. Meaning, when you make those assumptions,
New York City Public School.
you deny your humanity, your individualism. It's like, I think I know you, you don't know me, you haven't had a conversation with me. And that's the kind of thing that looking at people through the racial lens does. In reading your book, it said in the year 2045, the US will shift from a white majority society to one of people of color. So how the heck are we trending this way with the issues we have? Meaning, where does the shift occur? And does it occur right now? And what would look like something that's facilitating the shift? Because when we as people of color speak about this, sometimes we're looked at as just complaining, it's just, it's them again.
Get over it.
People start to tune out. So what needs to happen?
Well, I looked at it from an organizational point of view within a particular industry. Okay?
Which we'll be talking about shortly, yes.
And which in no way represents the current US population, which is 60% white, non-Hispanic, and 40% people of color. And
that's what it is currently?
That's what that's the census statistics now. So by 2045, there will be a transformation, and we are in the process of transforming our society to a majority people of color society.
It's scaring a lot of people.
Absolutely. It's scaring white people. Because of white privilege, which I have a quote from white scholar Peggy McIntosh about defining what white privilege is. May I read it?
Yes, I'd love to hear this.
Okay,
yes.
Here it is.
Speak, sister.
White scholar Peggy McIntosh wrote, quote, "White privilege is an invisible package of unearned assets that I, as a white person, can count on cashing in each day, but which I was meant to remain oblivious."
Meant to remain oblivious.
So there are a lot of oblivious white people in the performing arts workforce and who really may say they value diversity, but in terms of seeing what's going on, aligning those words with action, that's the problem. There's not an active anti-racist force happening, which will transform our industry so that we look like the U.S. population.
Does that stem from that stems from the board?
Yes, it does.
And then, but it begins with the dollar. Does it not?
Does. Right.
Meaning, if you run a performing arts institution, you want to make sure that you have the philanthropic support. You want to make sure that you've got what they call in the seats, people in the seats. All of that costs money, so they are reaching for that target audience. How does that change if it's perceived that those are the ones with the discretionary income to keep these kinds of organizations afloat?
Well, again, let's first start with the statistics of funders. So the nonprofit organizations are funded through ticket sales, the performing arts workforce. And if we look at the audiences to ballet, to opera, over 80% of those ticket sales come from white patrons. If we look at the boards of directors of nonprofit organizations, 90% of the chairs are white, 35% of those boards don't have a single person of color on their board. If we look at foundations, 91% of foundation chairs are white board chairs. And it's an issue, obviously, in terms of the money and where it's spent. 4% of foundation funding, we were talking earlier, 4% goes to cultural organizations of color.
Right.
I mean, it's inequitable.
Very out of balance. What about government funding?
The Department of Cultural Affairs took a look at the diversity of the workforce here in New York. Also, the LA County Commission did an examination of the diversity of the cultural workforce in Los Angeles. Both majority people of color cities, where again, the workforce, the leadership is primarily white. Pittsburgh also did it as well. And most of their funding in Pittsburgh, public funding, goes to primarily white organizations.
Go ahead, Phil.
So are we saying that consciously minority organizations within the cultural community are purposely being underfunded or not being funded?
Or ignored because they just don't count.
Right. And saying one thing and doing another.
I would say that's accurate.
Ooh. Okay.
So I have a question. So in terms of the percentages that you gave us, the fund granting institutions or agencies, whether they're private or public, how do they view these organizations and the work that's being done? Is it that only certain types of art is considered art, whether it's got to be performed a certain way with a certain accent, with a certain dialect? And is it that perhaps these organizations from communities of color or cultural organizations, the work that they're performing or presenting, is it that that's not respected in the same way? Is it that it's not valued as art or as something that's significant?
You know, there hasn't been a study that has definitively shown what you're saying. All I have are these studies that have been done about the statistics and where the money is going and how inequitable it is. And there are funding organizations that are taking a very hard look at the diversity of their boards and bringing people in with lived experience from the community to be making these decisions, because the people that are on these boards have very little lived experience in communities of color. And they're using their white progressive lens in making these decisions, which don't necessarily correspond to reality. So by changing the structure of funding, by recruiting more people of color and senior, by hiring an executive recruiter who has a track record in placing executives of color, both on the board and in leadership, perhaps the structure of giving will evolve.
But so much of it is your network. And oftentimes when you are an ED, they're buying who you know. So you got to be in that network. You may not be. The other piece is when you're recruiting board members, can they make the give or get? Right. And if you don't make the give or get, well, we'll bring you on special. And then you're sitting there special for a term. And then it's like, well, where's your give or get? Meaning memories are so short. You know, so this is a situation. I think it's kind of a crisis. I would go that far as to saying that we're looking at a crisis around culture. But unfortunately, I'm getting the rap, and I'm really enjoying this conversation.
Already?
Tobie, this is fantastic work that you're doing. I do want to ask this question. Why are you taking this on as a pursuit? You don't have to, or maybe you have to.
I feel compelled to take this on because early in my career, I was a fundraiser for a community-based organization in Brooklyn. And my mentor, may he rest in peace and in power, was African American. And he worked for a corporation, and he was the only one. And he explained to me what was going on in his life. And at the same time, he was helping me navigate the male-led organization I was in. And the guy who was in charge was a very sexist person. So I have never forgotten him, and I feel he also allowed me to be part of his work and be with him in communities of color. So I was able to really observe his presence there and the difference he made there. And he felt that from his community.
I'm so pleased that you're so fearless, you know, because that's what it takes. It takes a fearlessness to give voice to issues that people are afraid of. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.